102 missed calls, all from the same number. The number I had blocked, unblocked, and blocked again more times than I could count over the past 10 years. I stared at my phone screen, watching it light up again in the quiet of my corner office. The Manhattan skyline glittering behind me like a crown I had earned with blood and patience. The caller ID read, Victoria Sterling, my mother. The woman who had looked me dead in the eyes on a freezing November night and said words I would never forget. You will come back begging in a month. Mark my words. I was 17 years old when she slammed that door in my face. I had nothing but a suitcase, $800, and a dignity I refused to let her take. I did not beg. I did not crawl. I walked away into the darkness, and I never looked back. Now, 10 years later, the roles had reversed completely. 103. 104. The calls kept coming, desperate and relentless. Before I tell you why I let it ring, let me take you back to the night my mother threw me out like garbage, and the secret she never wanted me to discover. I was 17, and the night my life shattered started with a dinner party I was never supposed to overhear. The Sterling mansion sat on 3 acres of manicured perfection in Greenwich, Connecticut, the kind of place where old money pretended to be humble while counting every penny of everyone else's worth. I had grown up in that house, but it never felt like home. More like a museum where I was one of the displays, expected to be beautiful, silent, and obedient. I was back from boarding school for Thanksgiving break, sitting through another one of my mother's elaborate dinner parties with a smile plastered on my face. The guests were the Harrison family, owners of a development firm my mother had been circling for months. A merger, she called it. A golden opportunity. My mother, Victoria, moved through the room like a queen holding court. Perfect blonde hair, perfect posture, perfect smile that never quite reached her eyes. She had married my father when she was 22 and widowed by 27. I barely remembered him, just fragments, a deep laugh, strong hands lifting me onto his shoulders, the smell of cedar and coffee. He died in a car accident when I was 5. My mother remarried 3 years later to Richard, a man who agreed with everything she said and never looked anyone directly in the eyes. My sister Meredith was born a year after that. The golden child. The one who did everything right. I was the reminder of the husband Victoria could not control. I felt it in every glance, every comparison, every cold silence when I entered a room. That night I excused myself to use the restroom. On my way back, I heard my name whispered in a tone that made me freeze outside the study door. I pressed myself against the wall, heart pounding, and listened. My mother's voice smooth and confident, and Mr. Harrison Sr. gruff and impatient. They were discussing an arrangement. It took me a moment to understand what I was hearing, and when I did, my blood turned to ice. My mother had promised my hand in marriage to Harrison Jr. The merger depended on it. Harrison Sr.'s voice was casual, almost bored. My son is difficult, I admit. But your daughter is pretty enough. She will learn to manage him. My mother's response made my stomach lurch. Elena will do as she is told. She has no other options. I have made sure of that. No other options. The words echoed in my skull. I had met Harrison Jr. once before, at a charity gala the previous spring. 24 years old with a smile that never matched his eyes. He had gripped my arm too hard when we danced, laughed when I winced, and spent the rest of the night staring at me like I was something he planned to collect. There were rumors about his ex-girlfriend, an accident, they called it. She had transferred schools and never spoke publicly again. My mother was selling me to that man, to save a business deal, to protect her empire. I stood in that hallway shaking with a rage I could barely contain, and waited until the guests left to confront her. The living room was empty except for my mother, arranging flowers that did not need arranging, and Richard hovering near the fireplace like a ghost, afraid to take up space. Meredith watched from the top of the stairs, 15 years old and already learning to be invisible when storms were coming. I did not bother with pleasantries. I heard everything. I am not marrying him. My mother's hand stilled on the roses. Her smile stayed frozen in place, but her eyes went sharp. "Excuse me, I heard your little arrangement with the Harrisons. I know about Harrison Jr. I know what he did to his ex-girlfriend. I would rather be homeless than married to a monster you picked for your profit." She turned slowly and the mask slipped. Not the polished hostess anymore. Something colder. Something I had seen glimpses of my whole life but never directly faced. She smiled and it made my skin crawl. "Homeless," she repeated. "That can be arranged." She gave me until morning. "Accept the engagement or leave. No money, no connections, no family." Richard said nothing. Did nothing. Meredith stood frozen at the top of the stairs, tears streaming down her face, but silent. Always silent. I went to my room and packed one suitcase. Clothes, documents, my grandmother's locket, the only jewelry I cared about. I counted my savings, birthday money I had hidden from Victoria over the years. $847. Not much. But it was mine. I looked around my childhood bedroom one last time and realized it had never really been mine at all. Just another room in a house full of beautiful things that belonged to a woman who saw people as possessions. On my dresser sat a photo of my grandmother Margaret, the real founder of Sterling Properties, the woman who had built an empire from nothing and loved me in a way my mother never could. She had died 2 years before, and since then, Victoria's grip on everything had become absolute. I picked up the photo and whispered to her, "I do not know what you meant, Grandma, but I am not staying here to find out." As I zipped my suitcase, I noticed something I had never seen before, a small envelope taped inside the lid. My grandmother's handwriting. "For Elena. When you are ready to leave." My heart slammed against my ribs. I almost opened it right there. But I heard my mother's footsteps approaching, and there was no time. I tucked the envelope into my coat pocket, grabbed my suitcase, and walked downstairs to face her one last time. Victoria waited by the front door, arms crossed, triumph written across her features. Richard stood behind her, useless as always. Meredith was still on the stairs, still crying, still saying nothing. My mother's voice was ice. "Last chance. Walk out that door and you are dead to this family. No calls, no money, nothing." I looked at the woman who had raised me, and I saw nothing. No love, no warmth, not even hatred. Just cold calculation. She had never seen me as a daughter, only as a tool. "I was never alive to you anyway," I said. And I walked out into the freezing November night. The door slammed behind me with a sound that felt like a bone breaking. My mother's voice followed me through the wood. "You will be back begging in a month. You hear me? 1 month." I kept walking. I did not look back. The cold air burned my lungs, and tears froze on my cheeks before they could fall. But I did not stop. I did not beg. What I did not know, what my mother had made certain I would never find out, was that my grandmother had left me something far more valuable than money, something that would destroy Victoria's entire empire. And it was sitting in my coat pocket, waiting for me to be ready. The roadside inn had a flickering neon sign and a clerk who asked no questions. That was all I needed. I had walked for 2 hours along the dark highway, suitcase wheels grinding against the pavement, breath turning to mist in the November cold. $42 bought me one night in a room that smelled like mildew and stale cigarettes. The heater rattled in the corner, pushing out barely enough warmth to stop my shivering. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing my coat, and finally allowed myself to feel the weight of what had just happened. I was alone. Truly, completely alone. 17 years old with a suitcase, $800 that would not last long, and a secret envelope I was terrified to open. I pulled my grandmother's locket from under my shirt and held it tight against my chest. The metal was warm from my skin, and for a moment I could almost feel her presence. Margaret Eleanor Sterling, the woman who had built an empire from nothing, the woman who had loved me when no one else did. She had died 2 years ago, and I still felt the loss like a phantom limb, aching in places I could not name. That was when I remembered her words, the ones she had whispered to me the night before she died. Words I had not understood then, words that suddenly felt like a warning. 2 years earlier, I had sat beside her hospital bed in a private suite filled with flowers and the steady beep of machines. She was 78 years old, and the cancer had hollowed her out until she looked like a paper version of herself. But her eyes were still sharp, still fierce. My mother paced outside the room making phone calls about the estate, already dividing up the spoils before my grandmother had even stopped breathing. For a few precious minutes I was alone with her. She grabbed my hand with surprising strength. "Come closer, sweetheart. There are things I need to tell you, things your mother must never hear." I leaned in, confused and a little frightened by the urgency in her voice. She studied my face like she was memorizing it. "I have watched how she treats you," she said, "like you are an inconvenience, a reminder of the man she could not control." She was talking about my father, her son, the man Victoria had married and the man who had died when I was 5 years old. My mother never spoke of him, and any time I asked questions, she changed the subject with a coldness that made me stop asking. My grandmother's eyes, clouded with pain medication, suddenly sharpened with an intensity that made me hold my breath. "Your father was my greatest joy," she said, "and you are his legacy, not hers, never hers. And I have made absolutely sure, that she cannot take what belongs to you." I did not understand. "What do you mean, Grandma? What belongs to me?" She glanced toward the door, paranoid even in her weakened state. "Not now. She is listening. She is always listening." She squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. "When you are ready to leave that house, and you will be someday, look in your suitcase, the one I gave you for your 13th birthday. I hid something there for you." I still did not understand. I was 15, still naive enough to believe that family meant safety. She saw my confusion, and her expression softened, but only for a moment. "Promise me, Elena. Promise you will not tell anyone about this conversation. Not Meredith, not Richard, especially not your mother." I promised. I did not know what I was promising, but I trusted her completely. She was the only person in that house who had ever made me feel loved without conditions. She nodded, satisfied, and then leaned even closer. Her voice dropped to a whisper so faint I had to strain to hear. "There are people who will help you when the time comes. A lawyer named Harold Whitman. He has something that belongs to you, something your mother tried to destroy." Her eyes bore into mine. "Do not let her break you, Elena. You are stronger than she knows, stronger than she fears." My mother's voice cut through from the hallway. "Elena, visiting hours are over. Let your grandmother rest." I started to pull away, but my grandmother held on, whispering so softly I almost missed it. "The company should have been yours. I wrote it in my will." But she changed it. She forged my signature while I was too weak to stop her. "Whitman has the original. Find him." Then she let go, and my mother was in the doorway, and the moment was over. 3 days later, my grandmother was dead. I never got another moment alone with her. At the funeral, Victoria smiled graciously and accepted condolences like a queen receiving tribute. I watched her, numb and silent, my grandmother's words locked inside me like a time bomb I did not know how to defuse. Now, sitting in that cheap motel room 2 years later, everything finally made sense. The envelope from my suitcase sat in my trembling hands, my grandmother's handwriting staring back at me. "For Elena. When you are ready to leave." I was ready now. I had no choice but to be ready. I tore it open carefully, as if the paper itself was precious. Inside was a handwritten letter and a business card. The card read, "Harold Whitman, attorney at law," with an address in Hartford, Connecticut. The letter was dated 3 years earlier, written when my grandmother was still healthy, still sharp, still fighting battles I knew nothing about. The first line made my heart stop. "My dearest Elena, if you are reading this, then your mother has finally shown you who she truly is." I kept reading, tears blurring my vision. She explained everything. Sterling Properties was built by her alone after her first husband, my grandfather, died young. Victoria had married Margaret's son, my father, not for love but for access to the company. When my father died in that car accident, Victoria wasted no time taking control. My grandmother had always suspected the accident was not an accident. She could never prove it, but she had never stopped believing that Victoria was involved. My stomach lurched. I had to pause, take a breath, remind myself to keep reading. 5 years before she died, my grandmother had rewritten her will. She left 51% of Sterling Properties to me, to be claimed when I turned 25. She gave a copy to Harold Whitman with instructions to keep it secret and safe. But 6 months before her death, Victoria discovered the will. She had her lawyers present while my grandmother was heavily sedated after surgery. She forced Margaret to sign a new version, one that gave Victoria complete control. They told the witnesses my grandmother was confused, that she wanted to correct a mistake. She was too weak to fight. But she had already given Harold the original, signed and notarized years before the forgery. The letter ended with words that seared themselves into my soul. "You own Sterling Properties, Elena, not her. Find Harold. Claim what is yours. And when the time comes, make her pay for what she did to both of us." I read the letter 3 more times, memorizing every word. Then I hid it back in the suitcase lining, in the same spot my grandmother had placed the envelope years ago. I looked at Harold Whitman's business card. Hartford was 3 hours away by bus. Part of me wanted to go immediately, demand answers, claim what was mine. But I was 17, homeless, with $800 to my name. I could not fight Victoria now. She had lawyers and money and power I could not imagine. I needed to survive first. Build myself up, learn how the world worked. Then, when I was ready, I would find Harold Whitman. And when I turned 25, I would take back everything she had stolen. I tucked the business card into my wallet and lay down on the lumpy motel bed. For the first time since walking out that door, I did not feel hopeless. I had a purpose now, a goal, a reason to keep going. I did not just leave that mansion with a suitcase and $800. I left with a weapon, a truth my mother thought she had buried forever. 3 days later, a letter arrived at the motel, forwarded from my old boarding school address. The return address said Law Offices of Harold Whitman. Inside was a single sentence. "Your grandmother told me you would come. I have been waiting. Call me when you are ready, but be careful. Your mother has eyes everywhere." 3 weeks after my mother threw me out, I moved to Bridgeport. It was far enough from Greenwich to avoid Victoria's social circle, but close enough to be practical. I found a tiny room above a laundromat, shared bathroom down the hall, $180 a week. The walls were thin enough to hear my neighbor's television at all hours, and the radiator clanked like someone was trapped inside it, but it was mine. My $800 lasted exactly 19 days. After that, survival meant working until my body screamed for rest and then working some more. I took a morning shift at a coffee shop, afternoon deliveries for a pharmacy, and weekend waitressing at a diner. I slept 5 hours a night if I was lucky. I ate 1 real meal a day, usually whatever the diner let me take home after closing. My hands became raw from washing dishes in industrial soap. My feet blistered from standing 12 hours straight. I lost 15 pounds in 3 weeks, not because I wanted to, but because I could not afford to eat properly. I kept Harold Whitman's business card in my wallet, tucked behind my dwindling cash. I had not called him yet. I was too scared, too broke, too focused on simply staying alive. But the worst part was not the exhaustion or the hunger. It was the whispers. Somehow, even 60 miles from Greenwich, my mother's version of the truth had found me first. It happened on a Saturday night at the diner. The place was packed, and I was running between tables with plates balanced on my arms when 2 women walked in. Designer handbags, perfect highlights, the kind of casual elegance that cost more than my monthly rent. I recognized them immediately, friends of Victoria, regulars at her charity galas. I kept my head down and approached their table, hoping they would not look too closely at the waitress in the stained apron. I was wrong. One of them gasped mid-sentence. "Oh my God, is that Victoria Sterling's daughter?" Her friend leaned in, whispering loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. "The one who ran off with that drug dealer? I heard she has been arrested twice already." My tray trembled in my hands. I forced myself to stay calm, to keep my face neutral, but my heart was pounding so hard I thought they must be able to hear it. The first woman turned to me with a smile dripping in fake sympathy. "Sweetheart, does your mother know you are working here? She has been worried sick about you." Something inside me snapped. My mother knows exactly where I am. She put me here. The words came out sharper than I intended. Both women stared at me, then exchanged glances filled with pity and judgment. The second one shook her head. "The poor thing. Clearly on something. Look at how thin she is." I walked away before I said something that would cost me my job. My manager gave me a warning look, and I swallowed my rage and kept serving tables until my shift ended at midnight. That night, in my tiny room above the laundromat, I borrowed a laptop from a coworker and searched my own name. What I found made me want to scream. Victoria had not just kicked me out. She had launched a full campaign to destroy my reputation before I could even try to fight back. The story she was telling everyone was elaborate and devastating. Her troubled daughter had suffered a breakdown after her grandmother's death. I had started dating a dangerous older man. I had gotten involved with drugs. I had stolen money from the family and run away. Victoria was heartbroken, of course, praying for my recovery, hoping I would get the help I needed. There were photos of her at charity events, dabbing at her eyes while accepting sympathy from her wealthy friends. The local paper had even quoted her. "As a mother, my heart is shattered, but we cannot help those who do not want to be helped." I stared at the screen, fury building in my chest until I could barely breathe. I wanted to expose the truth, to tell everyone what really happened. But who would believe me? I was a homeless 17-year-old with nothing. She was Victoria Sterling, philanthropist, businesswoman, grieving mother. Then it hit me. She was not just punishing me for leaving. She was strategically discrediting me for the future. If I ever tried to claim my grandmother's real will, Victoria could point to all of this and say I was a troubled addict making up lies for money. She was building her defense before I even knew I would need to attack. This was not anger. This was a calculated execution. My mother was not just cruel, she was dangerous. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time. Then I grabbed a notebook and wrote 3 words. Keep receipts. Document everything. Wait. January arrived with bitter cold and the kind of exhaustion that settles into your bones and refuses to leave. I was delivering prescriptions one afternoon when I accidentally walked into the wrong office. The sign on the door read, Chen Properties, Boutique Real Estate Solutions. A woman in her 50s looked up from her desk, sharp eyes taking in my disheveled appearance and the pharmacy bag in my hand. "You are on the wrong floor," she said, but then she paused, studying me more closely. "You look like you have not slept in a month. Sit down before you collapse." I started to refuse, but something in her voice stopped me. She made me tea and asked questions. Where did I go to school? Where did I work? How old I was? I found myself answering honestly, too tired to construct lies. When I mentioned Greenwich Academy, her expression shifted. "Greenwich? You would not happen to know the Sterling family, would you?" I hesitated for only a moment before deciding I had nothing left to lose. "Victoria Sterling is my mother. She kicked me out 2 months ago." The woman leaned back in her chair, studying me with new interest. Her name was Diane Chen, and what she told me next changed everything. "Victoria Sterling destroyed my husband's business 15 years ago," she said. "Undercut his bids, spread rumors about faulty construction, got his license suspended on false charges. He never recovered. Died of a heart attack 3 years later." She looked at me with something I had not seen in months. Respect. "So, you survived her too." We talked for hours. I did not tell Diane about the inheritance or Harold Whitman. It was too risky, and I did not know yet if I could trust her. But I told her about the ultimatum, the arranged marriage, the lies Victoria was spreading. Diane listened without interrupting, nodding slowly. "Your mother is a predator," she said. "She finds people's weaknesses and exploits them. The only way to survive her is to become something she cannot destroy." Then she made me an offer. A part-time internship at Chen Properties. No salary at first, just learning the business. Watching how deals were made. Understanding how power worked. "I am not offering you charity," Diane said. "I am offering you an education. The kind your mother never wanted you to have." Something clicked in my mind. My grandmother had built Sterling Properties from nothing. Diane had built Chen Properties from the ashes of what Victoria destroyed. Maybe I did not need to wait until I was 25 to start fighting back. Maybe I could start building now. I accepted her offer that same day. February came with freezing rain and the first hint that I might actually survive this. I was working mornings at the coffee shop, afternoons at Chen Properties, weekends at the diner. It was brutal, but for the first time I was learning instead of just surviving. Then one night, at 2 a.m, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. A whisper on the other end. "Elena? It is me. Meredith." My heart stopped. I had not heard from my sister since the night I left. She was crying, her voice barely audible. "I cannot talk long." Mom checks my phone. "What is wrong?" I asked. "Are you okay?" "I am fine. I am not fine. Everything is wrong here. Mom is different since you left. Angrier, more paranoid." I wanted to comfort her, but I also remembered. She had stood on those stairs and said nothing while our mother threw me out. "Why are you calling me, Meredith?" Her voice dropped even lower. "I found something. In Mom's office. Documents about Grandma's estate." My pulse raced. What kind of documents? I do not understand all of it. But there are 2 different versions of Grandma's will, and one of them has your name all over it. Mom has been hiding it. She does not know I saw. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. Then I heard footsteps in the background on her end. Meredith gasped. "Someone is coming. I have to go." "Wait," I said. "Can you get copies? Can you—" The line went dead. I sat in the dark, heart pounding, phone clutched to my chest. My little sister had just become my only ally inside enemy territory. But I also knew the truth. If Victoria caught Meredith helping me, my sister would face the same fate I did. Or worse. I had to be careful, I had to be patient, and I had to get those documents before my mother destroyed them forever. 6 months after my mother kicked me out, I finally found the courage to make the call. I was 18 now, legally an adult, no longer a runaway minor who could be dragged back home. I had spent months staring at Harold Whitman's business card, tracing the embossed letters with my fingertip, wondering what secrets waited on the other end of that phone number. After Meredith's midnight call about the 2 wills, I knew I could not wait any longer. Something was happening inside that mansion, and I needed answers before Victoria destroyed whatever evidence remained. Diane had noticed me distracted at work, staring into space when I should have been reviewing contracts. She asked me what was wrong, and I told her a partial truth. There is someone I need to meet, a lawyer who knew my grandmother. But I am afraid of what I will find. She looked at me with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Fear does not protect you," she said. "It just delays the inevitable. Whatever it is, you face it now or face it later. But you will face it." That night, I dialed the number on the card. It rang 4 times before a gruff voice answered. "I wondered how long it would take you to call. Your grandmother always said you would need time to find your courage. Looks like she was right." Harold Whitman sounded old and tired, but there was a sharpness beneath the weariness that reminded me of my grandmother. He confirmed he had been Margaret's personal attorney for over 30 years. Trusted advisor, friend, keeper of secrets. Your mother fired me the week after Margaret's funeral, he said. Did not even let me attend the service. But your grandmother knew that would happen. She prepared for it. I asked to meet him in person. He agreed, but his conditions made my skin prickle with unease. We cannot meet at my office. Your mother has people watching. We cannot meet anywhere in Connecticut. Too risky. He suggested a location in upstate New York, a small town called Rhinebeck, about 3 hours north. A diner called Martha's Kitchen, his late wife's favorite place. Come alone, he said. Tell no one. And Elena, bring something that proves you are really Margaret's granddaughter. A photo, a letter, anything. I need to know this is not a trap. A trap, I repeated. Why would anyone trap you? The line went silent for a long moment. Then his voice dropped to barely a whisper. Because your mother has already tried twice. Once with a private investigator pretending to be a journalist. Once with a woman claiming to be a distant relative. She knows I have something. She just does not know exactly what. My blood ran cold. Victoria was not just covering her tracks. She was actively hunting for evidence. Harold Whitman had been protecting something for 2 years, waiting for me. And my mother would do anything to find it first. The Greyhound bus left Bridgeport at 6 a.m. on a Saturday in late May. I sat by the window, watching the landscape shift from suburban sprawl to rolling hills dotted with farms and forests. I had brought my grandmother's locket, her original letter, and a photograph from my 15th birthday, showing the two of us laughing together in her garden. 3 pieces of proof that I was who I claimed to be. The bus ride gave me time to think, to organize everything I knew. My grandmother's whispered warning in the hospital, the letter hidden in my suitcase, Meredith's discovery of 2 wills in Victoria's office, and now Harold Whitman, the keeper of the original document that could change everything. I stared out the window and wondered what kind of life I might have had if my grandmother had lived longer, if my father had never died, if my mother had been capable of love instead of just calculation. But wondering did no good. I had learned that lesson the hard way. All I could do now was move forward. As the bus pulled into Rhinebeck, I noticed a black SUV parked across from the station. Tinted windows, Connecticut plates. My heart stopped. Had Victoria found out? Was I walking into an ambush? I stayed frozen in my seat, barely breathing, watching the vehicle. Then the driver stepped out. An elderly woman with a walker, moving slowly toward the pharmacy next door. Just a coincidence. But the fear did not leave me. It never really left anymore. Martha's Kitchen was exactly what I expected from a small-town diner. Red vinyl booths, the smell of coffee and bacon, a Saturday lunch crowd of families and truckers and elderly couples sharing pie. I scanned the room and spotted him in the corner booth. White hair, rumpled suit that had probably been expensive 2 decades ago, reading a newspaper but watching the door over the top of it. I approached slowly. Mr. Whitman? He studied my face for a long moment, his eyes sharp despite his age. Then he nodded. You have Margaret's eyes. Sit down. I slid into the booth across from him and placed my proof on the table. The locket, the letter, the photograph. He examined each item carefully, holding the letter up to the light, running his thumb over my grandmother's handwriting. That is her script, he said finally. I would recognize it anywhere. She wrote this letter at my office, you know. Made me witness it. Said someday you would need proof that she loved you. My eyes stung, but I refused to cry. Not here, not now. Whitman reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick manila envelope, worn at the edges, sealed with red wax. This, he said quietly, is the original last will and testament of Margaret Eleanor Sterling. Signed, notarized, and witnessed on March 15th, 6 years ago, 2 years before your mother created her alternative version. He slid documents across the table, and I read them with trembling hands. The original will was clear and specific. 51% of Sterling Properties shares to Elena Margaret Sterling, to be claimed upon reaching age 25. 15% to Meredith, 34% to Victoria, but with restrictions. She could not sell, merge, or restructure without board approval. There was also a trust fund established for my education, completely separate from Victoria's control. And the family estate in Vermont, the one my grandmother had loved most, was left directly to me. Whitman explained everything in a low voice, glancing occasionally toward the door. Margaret knew your mother would try to seize control after she died. She structured the will to give you majority ownership, but only at 25. She hoped you would be mature enough by then to handle the responsibility and fight back if necessary. The education trust was supposed to protect you through college, but Victoria blocked it by claiming you were estranged and unreachable. I felt sick. Even from beyond the grave, my grandmother had tried to protect me, and Victoria had dismantled every safeguard, stolen every protection, left me with nothing. How did she forge the will? I asked. Whitman's face darkened. 6 months before your grandmother died, Victoria obtained power of attorney. She bribed a doctor named Gerald Hoffman to declare Margaret mentally incapacitated. Then she brought in her own lawyers while your grandmother was heavily sedated after surgery. They created a new will, had Margaret sign it while she was barely conscious, and filed it with the court before anyone could object. Can we prove the forgery? My voice came out harder than I expected. Whitman sighed heavily. I have the original will. I have testimony about your grandmother's mental clarity in the months before that surgery. I have suspicions about the doctor. But suspicions are not evidence. And your mother has spent 2 years covering her tracks. Right now, if we went to court, it would be your word against hers. She has money, lawyers, and a public image. You have a diner job and an internship. The truth of his words settled over me like a weight. I needed more than the original will. I needed proof of the forgery. I needed witnesses willing to testify. I needed time and resources and power I did not have, not yet. Whitman gave me copies of everything, the original will, his notes, a timeline of events. He told me to hide them somewhere Victoria would never look. Not in my apartment, not on my computer. Your mother has resources you cannot imagine, he said. Private investigators, hackers, people who make problems disappear. I understood what he was telling me. I could not fight Victoria now. I would have to wait until I turned 25, 7 more years, but I could use that time to build my case. Document everything Victoria did wrong with Sterling Properties. Find the doctor who had signed off on my grandmother's false incapacity declaration. Locate witnesses from the nursing staff and household who had seen what really happened. And build enough financial independence that Victoria could not destroy me through poverty alone. Your mother is not stupid, Whitman warned as I stood to leave. She is paranoid, but she is also patient. Right now she thinks you are a failed runaway, an embarrassment to forget. Let her keep thinking that. The moment she realizes you are a threat, she will come for you with everything she has. So I stay invisible, I said. I stay quiet. I let her think she has won, until I am ready to prove she lost. He nodded slowly. Then he grabbed my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. One more thing. Your grandmother left something else. Not in the will, separate, private, a safe deposit box in Vermont. She said you would know what to do with what is inside. But Elena, his eyes darkened, she also said that box contains things that could destroy more than just your mother's reputation. Be very sure you are ready before you open it. I left Martha's kitchen with a folder full of documents, a safe deposit box key pressed into my palm, and a new understanding of what I was really fighting. This was not just about money or inheritance. My grandmother had gathered secrets. Secrets dangerous enough that she had hidden them away, waiting for someone brave enough to use them. And now that someone was me, I just had to survive long enough to become the weapon she knew I could be. 2 years after my mother kicked me out, I barely recognized the girl I used to be. I was 19 now, no longer sleeping in cheap motel rooms or surviving on leftover diner food. I had earned my GED while working full-time, enrolled in online college courses for business administration and real estate law, and studied until 2 in the morning every night because sleep felt like a luxury I had not yet earned. Diane Chen had promoted me from unpaid intern to junior associate, the youngest person to ever hold that title at her company. She had become more than a mentor. She was the closest thing to a mother I had ever known, though neither of us said it out loud. I handled small property transactions on my own now, and my reputation was growing quietly in certain circles. The young woman who never misses a detail. The one who works harder than anyone in the room. My hair was shorter, professional. My clothes were simple but sharp. I had learned to control my expressions, to hide my thoughts behind a pleasant mask. Victoria's daughter had learned to wear a mask too, but mine served a different purpose. Underneath the calm exterior, the anger still burned. I had just learned to use it as fuel instead of fire. On the anniversary of the night I was kicked out, I did something I had been planning for months. I walked into a bank, sat across from a loan officer, and made my first real estate investment, a condemned duplex in Norwalk that nobody else wanted. I bought it for $32,000 using money I had saved penny by penny from every paycheck, every tip, every side job I could find. The building was a wreck. Broken windows, rotting floors, a roof that leaked in 3 places. But it was mine. The first thing I had ever truly owned. I spent every weekend for 4 months renovating it myself. I learned plumbing from YouTube videos and trial and error. I taught myself basic electrical work, drywall repair, painting techniques. My hands blistered and bled. My muscles ached so badly some nights I could barely climb the stairs to my apartment. But I kept going because every nail I hammered was a step away from the girl who had walked out of that mansion with nothing. Diane helped me navigate the permits and inspections. I hired contractors only for the work I legally could not do myself. And when the duplex finally sold for $78,000, I sat alone in my apartment and counted my profit. $19,000 in cash, fanned out on my kitchen table like a winning hand. I did not count it because I needed to. I counted it because I needed to feel it. Every dollar was a brick in the wall I was building between myself and the girl who had once begged for a chance. I would never beg again. I would buy. I reinvested immediately. 2 more distressed properties in working-class neighborhoods, then a third, then a fourth. And in the quiet hours of the night, when the work was done and the apartment was silent, I tracked Sterling properties. I had set up alerts for every news mention, every financial filing, every public record. What I saw confirmed everything Harold Whitman had warned me about. Victoria was destroying the company my grandmother had built. Bad acquisitions that cost more than they earned. Key employees leaving for competitors. Debt increasing every quarter while revenue stagnated. Client lawsuits over broken contracts and missed deadlines. Victoria's management style was her downfall. She was paranoid, controlling, incapable of delegating or trusting anyone. The board was restless, but they were too afraid to challenge her. I documented everything in a private journal, every bad decision, every financial misstep, every employee who quit in frustration. I was building a timeline of incompetence, not just for revenge, but for evidence when the time finally came. The irony was almost poetic. My mother had kicked me out to protect her empire. Now, 4 years later, she was dismantling it herself, brick by brick. I did not need to destroy Sterling Properties. I just needed to be ready to pick up the pieces when she finished burning it down. Meredith and I had developed a system. Burner phones purchased with cash, changed every few months, numbers known only to each other. After her call went silent following that first midnight conversation, I had feared the worst. But 3 months later, a new number reached out with our childhood code phrase, and I knew she was still with me. She was 17 now, still trapped in the mansion, still playing the obedient golden child. But secretly, she had become my eyes inside enemy territory. She reported everything. Victoria's erratic moods, her paranoid accusations against employees and board members. Richard sleeping in a separate bedroom, barely speaking at family dinners. The growing tension in a house that had always been cold, but was now becoming something worse. One Saturday afternoon, my burner phone buzzed with Meredith's number. Her voice was strange when I answered. Tight and controlled, almost robotic. Elena, Mom had a meeting with Harrison Sr. last week. behind closed doors. When she came out, she looked scared. I have never seen her scared before. My blood ran cold. The Harrisons, the family Victoria had tried to sell me to. They were still in the picture, and whatever my mother owed them, it was bad enough to frighten her. I told Meredith to be careful, to keep watching, to protect herself above all else. But after we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, wondering what kind of deal Victoria had made with those people and what it would cost her when it came due. By my 4th year on my own, I was 21 years old and no longer working at the diner or the coffee shop. Real estate was my full-time career now. My portfolio had grown steadily, 8 properties renovated and sold, 3 rental units generating passive income every month. Net worth approaching $200,000. All of it held under an LLC I had named Phoenix Holdings, rising from the ashes. Diane had made me a partner at Chen Properties, the youngest in company history. My name was not public, and I operated through the LLC to stay invisible. As far as Greenwich society knew, Victoria's troubled daughter had disappeared years ago, probably dead in a ditch somewhere or wasting away in some addiction facility. I let them believe it. Invisibility was my greatest weapon. I had started attending real estate conferences, building relationships with investors and contractors and lawyers, learning who Victoria's enemies were. And there were many. Whispers followed her everywhere now. Difficult to work with, impossible to trust, bleeding money. I filed away every name, every connection, every piece of gossip. 4 more years until I turned 25 and could claim my inheritance. But I was not just waiting. I was building an empire parallel to the one that had been stolen from me. When I finally revealed myself, I would not be a desperate girl with a piece of paper. I would be a force Victoria could not ignore, dismiss, or destroy. In April, a commercial broker I had met at a conference called me with an opportunity. "There is a property going to auction next month," she said. "Former warehouse district in New Haven. Multiple bidders expected, including Sterling Properties." I smiled into the phone. "Tell me everything." The auction took place in a hotel ballroom in Hartford. I attended as a representative of Phoenix Holdings, wearing a professional suit and glasses I did not need. My hair was different now. My posture changed. My entire presence transformed from the 17-year-old who had walked out of that mansion. I scanned the room. Lawyers, developers, investors. And then I saw her. Victoria swept in like she owned the room. Designer dress, perfect hair, that smile I remembered too well. Richard trailed behind her, looking exhausted and diminished. They took seats in the front row, expecting to dominate as they always did. I positioned myself near the back and watched. The auction began, and I observed Victoria's strategy. She bid aggressively, arrogantly, driving the price higher than the property was worth. Ego over calculation. A classic mistake. I dropped out early as planned and watched her win, overpaying by at least 15%. Another bad decision for my file, another crack in her foundation. As the auction ended and people filed toward the exit, I found myself walking behind Victoria, close enough to smell her perfume. The same Chanel she had worn my entire childhood. She was on her phone, complaining about incompetent contractors and disloyal employees. Her elbow brushed my arm as she passed through the doorway. She did not apologize, did not even glance back, but I stopped, stood in that doorway for a moment, watching her walk away. "Enjoy it while you can, Mother," I whispered. "Your time is almost up." A voice behind me made me freeze. "Excuse me, are you not Victoria Sterling's daughter?" I turned slowly to face a man I did not recognize, tall, dark-haired, watching me with unsettling intensity. "I have no idea what you are talking about," I said calmly. But his eyes told me he did not believe a single word. The stranger's eyes held mine with an intensity that made my pulse race. I kept my expression neutral, the mask I had perfected over 5 years of survival. "I already told you," I said. "I have no idea what you are talking about." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Just recognition. My mistake, then. "You just bear a striking resemblance to someone I have been researching for a very long time." He handed me a business card before I could respond. Nathan Cole, Cole Development Group. The name hit me like a slap. Cole Development was one of Sterling Properties' biggest competitors. I had seen their name in industry publications, watched them win bids Victoria had wanted, noted how aggressively they had grown in the past decade, and now their CEO was standing in front of me, claiming to know exactly who I was. I pocketed the card without looking at it. Interesting company, I said carefully. I hear they are doing well. Nathan tilted his head, studying me like a puzzle he was determined to solve. We are. No thanks to Victoria Sterling. She tried to destroy us once. She failed. He paused, letting the words sink in. I am not here to expose you, Elena. I am here because we have something in common. We both want to see Victoria Sterling burn. He said it so casually, like he was discussing the weather. But his eyes told a different story. There was hatred there, the kind that only comes from deep personal wounds. Whatever Victoria had done to this man, it was not just business. It was war. We ended up in a quiet corner of the hotel bar, 2 untouched drinks sitting between us. I kept my guard up, watching for any sign that this was a trap. But something about Nathan's anger felt genuine. Too raw to be performance. He told me his story, and with every word, my understanding of my mother's cruelty expanded. His father, Robert Cole, had built Cole Development from nothing in the 1980s. For years, Sterling Properties and Cole Development had been friendly competitors, occasionally partnering on projects, respecting each other's territory. Then everything changed. When Nathan was 18, his father secured the biggest contract of his career, a waterfront development in Stamford worth tens of millions. Victoria wanted that contract. She did not just compete for it, she annihilated Robert Cole to get it. She spread rumors that Cole Development used substandard materials. She bribed a building inspector to file false safety violations. Robert Cole's license was suspended pending investigation. By the time he was cleared 18 months later, he had lost everything. Clients had fled, his reputation was destroyed. He filed for bankruptcy and never recovered. 6 months later, Robert Cole died of a heart attack. Nathan was 20 years old, burying his father while Victoria Sterling celebrated her stolen victory. She did not just beat him, Nathan said, his voice low and controlled. She erased him, made sure no one would remember Robert Cole as anything but a failure. He died thinking he was worthless. Nathan looked at me with an intensity that made me shiver. I was 20 years old, standing at my father's grave, and I swore I would take back everything she stole. I have been building toward that for 12 years, and now I find out Victoria's own daughter is doing the same thing. That is not a coincidence. That is an opportunity. I should have walked away. Every instinct I had developed over 5 years of survival screamed that trusting anyone was dangerous. Victoria had turned people before. She could have planted Nathan to draw me out. But something in his story resonated too deeply to dismiss. I knew what it felt like to lose a father because of Victoria. I knew the rage that never faded, the hunger for justice that shaped every decision. And I knew that I had been building my case alone for too long. I needed resources, connections, evidence I could not gather on my own. Nathan had all of those things. The question was whether I could trust him enough to share what I knew. Why should I trust you? I asked. For all I know, you are working for her. This could be another one of her traps. Nathan considered the question for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and showed me a photograph. His father, gaunt and gray, lying in a hospital bed. The image was devastating. A man who looked 80, but could not have been older than 50. This was taken 2 days before he died, Nathan said. His voice cracked almost imperceptibly. He was 53 years old. Victoria Sterling took everything from him. His business, his reputation, his will to live. He put the phone away. I do not work for her. I exist to end her. I believed him. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe 5 years of isolation had made me desperate for an ally. But looking into Nathan's eyes, I saw a mirror of my own pain. Two people destroyed by the same monster, both building toward the same reckoning. We spent the next hour talking strategy. I did not reveal everything. Not the original will, not Harold Whitman, not the safe deposit box in Vermont. I kept my biggest secrets close, maintaining leverage. But I told him enough. The kicked out at 17. The forced marriage I refused. The lies Victoria had spread to destroy my reputation. Nathan listened without interrupting, nodding slowly, and he shared what he had gathered over 12 years of investigation. Shell companies in Delaware that Victoria used to hide assets, bribes to zoning officials documented through financial records, falsified environmental reports that had allowed Sterling Properties to build on protected land. Together we began mapping Victoria's network of lies. 3 weeks later, I sat in Nathan's office in downtown Hartford, surrounded by whiteboards covered in timelines and documents. We had been meeting in secret, late nights poring over evidence, strategy sessions over takeout containers. Nathan had resources I could only dream of. Forensic accountants, private investigators, a legal team on retainer. And he had years of documentation I had never seen. The picture emerging was darker than I had imagined. Victoria's corruption ran deeper than simple greed. She had destroyed at least 4 other businesses the same way she destroyed the Coles. She had bribed judges, manipulated land deals, possibly even blackmailed a state senator who had tried to investigate her practices. Nathan was impressed by my discipline, my analytical mind, my cold patience. I was impressed by his resources, his intelligence, his matching hatred. And something else had begun to simmer beneath the surface. One night, past midnight, we were reviewing financial discrepancies in Sterling's third-quarter reports. Nathan reached across the table for a document, and his hand brushed mine. We both froze. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. The air between us felt charged, electric with something neither of us was ready to name. Then I pulled back, reaching for my coffee instead. "We should focus," I said, my voice steadier than my pulse. Nathan nodded, but his eyes lingered a second too long. We both knew something was shifting between us, and we both knew we could not afford to let it distract us from the mission. 6 months into our alliance, I was 23 years old and closer to Victoria's destruction than ever before. Then Meredith called. Her voice was strange when I answered my burner phone. Tight, controlled, almost robotic. "Elena. How are you doing? I have been thinking about you lately." My instincts screamed that something was wrong. Meredith never made small talk. We had developed codes over the years, phrases that meant specific things. "How is the weather there?" meant, "Are you being watched?" I replied carefully. "It has been stormy lately, very stormy." My blood ran cold. Victoria was monitoring the call. Elena continued in that strange, flat voice. "I hope things clear up soon. Mom says everything will be fine. She has been very attentive lately. Very attentive." The words hit me like ice water. Victoria had noticed something, maybe found something, maybe suspected Meredith's betrayal. My little sister was sitting in that mansion playing the perfect daughter, while our mother circled like a shark that smelled blood. "I have to go now," Meredith said. "Mom wants me for dinner. Love you." The line went dead before I could respond. I called Nathan immediately. "We have a problem. Victoria is on to Meredith. We need to accelerate our timeline." 2 weeks later, at 3 a.m, my phone exploded with calls from Meredith's burner number. I answered, groggy and confused. Her voice was not controlled this time. It was raw panic, barely a whisper. "Elena, I messed up." She found the phone. She found everything. I bolted upright in bed. "What happened?" "Richard. He was going through my room. I do not know why. He found my hiding spot. He took the phone straight to Mom. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely think. What did she do?" Meredith described the confrontation in fragments. Victoria's face going white, then purple with rage, screaming at Meredith for an hour, calling her a traitor, a snake, just like her sister, demanding to know everything Meredith had told me. Meredith had lied, claimed she only called to beg me to come home. Victoria did not believe her. She took my phone, my laptop, everything. I am locked in my room. There is someone outside my door. Private security, I think. She cannot do that, I said. You are 19. That is false imprisonment. Meredith's voice cracked. She does not care. She said if I try to leave, she will have me committed. She has a doctor who will sign the papers. The same one who signed for Grandma. The same doctor. The same playbook Victoria had used to forge my grandmother's will. Now she was threatening to use it against my sister. Elena, Meredith's voice broke completely. I am scared. She looks at me the way she used to look at you, like I am not her daughter anymore, like I am just a problem to solve. I heard footsteps in the background on her end. Someone was coming. I have to go. Please, please help me. Do not let her do to me what she did to Grandma. Do not let her make me disappear. The line went dead. I grabbed my keys, my jacket, the folder of evidence Nathan and I had compiled. Victoria had finally made a mistake she could not take back. She had shown Meredith exactly who she really was, a monster who would sacrifice her own children to protect her lies. Now Meredith was not just a source, she was a witness. And she was also my sister. I had spent 5 years building toward revenge. But revenge could wait another day. Tonight I had a rescue mission, and God help anyone who tried to stop me. Nathan's office felt like a war room at 3 a.m. Maps of Greenwich spread across the table, security team on standby, lawyers ready to intervene if things went wrong. I paced the floor while Nathan made calls, coordinating resources I could never have gathered on my own. The situation was worse than Meredith had described. Nathan's contact inside the Greenwich Police Department had disturbing news. Victoria had filed a report that evening claiming Meredith suffered a psychotic break and might be dangerous to herself. She was building a paper trail. If we took Meredith and Victoria called the police, they would treat us as kidnappers and my sister as a mental patient who needed to be returned to her mother's care. This was not just a rescue anymore. It was a race against a legal trap. Nathan's security team consisted of 2 former military operatives who asked no questions and followed orders precisely. We had a lawyer on standby for emergency custody issues and a doctor ready to examine Meredith and certify her mental competence the moment we got her out. The mansion layout was familiar to me from 17 years of living there, but Meredith had provided additional details over our years of secret communication. Security changed shifts at 4 a.m. There would be a 15-minute gap. Her room faced the back garden and was accessible through the service entrance. Victoria slept in the master suite on the opposite end of the house. Richard had moved to the guest wing. If we moved fast and quiet, we could extract Meredith before anyone noticed. If we failed, Victoria would use the police report to have my sister committed, and I would lose her forever. We drove through the darkness toward Greenwich, the same roads I had walked 6 years ago with nothing but a suitcase and $800. Everything looked the same. Manicured hedges, iron gates, old money pretending to be humble while destroying anyone who threatened their position. Nathan sat beside me in the back of the black SUV, his hand occasionally brushing mine in silent reassurance. The 2 operatives in front said nothing. They had done extractions before, though I suspected not usually from Connecticut mansions. When the Sterling estate appeared through the trees, my breath caught. The house where I had grown up, the prison I had escaped, the place where my grandmother had died and my mother had stolen everything. Memories flashed unbidden, playing in the garden as a child. My grandmother teaching me the names of flowers by the fountain. The window of my old room, dark now, probably converted to something else. Victoria had erased me from that house long before she kicked me out. We parked 2 blocks away and proceeded on foot. The security operative confirmed the shift change was happening. Nathan's tech person had disabled the electronic lock on the back gate an hour earlier. We slipped through the garden, moving between shadows, and I led the way because I knew every path and hiding spot from years of escaping Victoria's scrutiny. As we approached the back of the house, I saw something that made me freeze. A light in Meredith's window, flickering and unsteady. Not electric light, candlelight. The curtain moved, and I caught a glimpse of my sister's face. Pale, terrified, pressing against the glass. She was watching for us. She knew we were coming. The question was who else knew. The service entrance door had the same old lock I had learned to pick as a teenager sneaking out after curfew. It clicked open easily, and we moved through the hallway past the kitchen where I used to hide during my mother's dinner parties. 12 steps to the second floor. The 7th one creaked, and I skipped it automatically. Meredith's door had a security guard's chair outside it, but the chair was empty. Shift change. I knocked softly. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. A code from our childhood, from nights when we would sneak into each other's rooms to escape the coldness of that house. The door opened a crack. Meredith's face appeared, tear-streaked and exhausted but alive. Elena. Oh God, Elena. She fell into my arms, and for 1 second I held her tight, feeling her shake against me. Then I pulled back. We have to go, now. Did you get what you needed? Meredith nodded and grabbed a backpack she had prepared. Everything I could find. Emails, financial documents, the fake will, and a recording of Mom threatening to have me committed. A recording, direct evidence, Victoria's own words captured and preserved. You recorded her, I whispered, stunned. Meredith's eyes were hard in a way I had never seen before. I have been recording her for months. Every conversation, every threat, every admission. She thought I was the loyal one, the stupid one. She never checked my room for devices. My baby sister had become a spy in her own home, and she had gathered ammunition that could destroy Victoria's entire defense. We were 10 feet from the service stairs when a light clicked on behind us. Richard stood at the end of the hallway wearing a bathrobe, holding his phone. His face was pale, conflicted, but his finger hovered over the dial button. I knew you would come, he said quietly. Victoria said you would. She has been waiting. I stepped in front of Meredith, shielding her with my body. Richard, do not do this. His voice cracked. I do not have a choice. She will destroy me if I let you leave. She is going to destroy you anyway, I said. You know that. You have seen what she does to people who are no longer useful. Richard hesitated. I could see the fear in his eyes, genuine terror of the woman he had married. Not loyalty, not love, just fear. I never wanted any of this, he said. When I married her, I thought she was. I did not know what she was. Then help us. Testify against her. We can protect you. He laughed bitterly. No one can protect me. You do not know the things I have helped her do. If she goes down, I go down with her. His thumb moved toward the call button. Then Meredith stepped forward, her voice cold as ice. Dad, if you make that call, I will tell them everything. About the Harrison deal. About what really happened to Elena's father. About the money in the Cayman Islands. Richard's face went white. How do you know about that? Meredith smiled grimly. I told you. I have been listening. Richard slowly lowered the phone. Whatever secrets Meredith had uncovered, they were enough to terrify him more than Victoria did. The Cayman accounts, I repeated. The Harrison deal. What really happened to my father? We need to talk about that later. Meredith nodded. Later. Right now we need to go. Richard stepped aside, defeated. Just go. But Elena, she will not stop. You know that. She will come for all of you. We moved down the service stairs, through the kitchen, out the back door. No more need for stealth. We ran across the garden, through the gate, sprinting toward the waiting SUV. The engine started as we threw ourselves inside. Nathan grabbed my hand as we pulled away. I looked back at the mansion one last time and saw a light click on in the master bedroom. Victoria's silhouette in the window. She knew, and the war had officially begun. My phone rang before we had gone a mile. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. Victoria's voice came through the speaker, cold and controlled. "Hello, Elena. I was wondering when you would finally show your face." My blood froze, but I kept my voice steady. "Victoria. That is mother to you, sweetheart. Though I suppose you have given up that privilege." Her voice dripped with venom. "You think you have won something tonight. You have taken my weak, pathetic daughter and run off with your little boyfriend." How touching. "But let me explain something to you." She paused, and her voice dropped to a whisper that felt louder than a scream. "I have known where you were for 2 years, who you have been working with, what you have been building. You thought you were invisible. I have been watching you the entire time. And now that you have shown yourself, the real game begins." I looked at Nathan, ice in my veins. Victoria continued, her voice sharp as a blade. "You have 48 hours to return Meredith. After that, I file kidnapping charges. And do not think your little company will protect you. I have already made some calls." "Meredith is 19, I said. "An adult. She left of her own free will." Victoria laughed. "My lawyers will have a different story. A troubled young woman suffering from delusions, manipulated by her estranged sister with a vendetta." "The same playbook you used on Grandma," I said. "It will not work this time." Silence. Then Victoria's voice, dangerous and low. "Do not you dare speak about my mother." "Your mother," I replied. "She built everything you have. And she wanted me to have it. We both know the truth about that will, Victoria." The line went dead. Nathan's phone rang immediately. He answered, listened, and his face went grim. He looked at me. "Check your bank accounts. Now." I opened my banking app with trembling fingers. For a moment, I did not understand what I was seeing. Then it hit me like a punch to the gut. Every account I had, personal and business, Phoenix Holdings and my private savings, all of it frozen. Red warnings across every screen. Suspected fraud. Investigation pending. Account holder Elena Victoria Sterling. My mother had not just called me. She had declared war. And her first strike had already landed. Nathan took my hand, the first time he had touched me deliberately. "We will figure this out. She wants you to panic. Do not give her the satisfaction." I looked at Meredith clutching her backpack full of evidence, at Nathan, whose empire was also now under attack, at my frozen accounts and my invisible life suddenly exposed. Victoria had drawn first blood, but she had also made a critical mistake. She had shown us exactly how far she was willing to go. There was no negotiating now, no halfway measures. Only one of us would survive this, and I was done hiding. 2 weeks after the rescue, my life had been systematically dismantled. Victoria worked fast. My apartment lease was terminated by an anonymous complaint about illegal activity. Every bank account I had was frozen pending a fraud investigation. Phoenix Holdings assets were seized for audit. Diane Chen called me with tears in her voice, explaining that her lawyers had advised her to suspend my partnership until the investigation concluded. She did not want to do it. She had no choice. 6 years of building, potentially destroyed in 14 days. I was living in Nathan's guest house now, the only roof available to me. Meredith was in a safe house 30 miles outside Hartford, protected by Nathan's security team. And FBI agents had contacted me twice, polite but suspicious, asking questions about wire transfers and offshore accounts I had never heard of. The accusations were extensive. Wire fraud, money laundering, identity theft spanning 4 years, all fabricated, all designed to bury me in legal quicksand while Victoria regrouped and planned her next attack. I cycled between rage and despair. Some nights I could not sleep. Some nights I could not stop sleeping, exhaustion dragging me under like a current I could not fight. But I refused to break. Victoria wanted me to crumble. She wanted me to crawl back, beg for mercy, admit defeat. I would die first. On day 15, an FBI agent named Marcus Webb sat across from me in Nathan's living room. He was in his 50s, gray at the temples, with tired eyes that had seen too much corruption to be easily fooled. He flipped through a thick folder, reading off the accusations like a grocery list. Bank transfers to offshore accounts. fake identities used to purchase properties, tax evasion spanning years. The evidence was damning, too damning. He looked up from the folder and studied my face. "Here is what bothers me," he said. "It is too extensive, too clean, almost like someone wanted us to find exactly what we found, exactly when we found it." My heart skipped. "What are you saying, Agent Webb?" He closed the folder slowly. "I am saying someone with significant resources really wants you destroyed. And I would like to know why." For the first time in 2 weeks, I felt something other than despair. This man was not a fool. He could see the frame for what it was. The question was whether he could prove it. Nathan assembled a war room in his home office, whiteboards covered with timelines, laptops running forensic analysis, former federal prosecutors and forensic accountants working around the clock. We began tracing the evidence against me backward, looking for the fingerprints Victoria had left in her haste to destroy me. What we found confirmed everything I suspected. The offshore accounts had been opened with forged documents. The signatures did not match mine. The fake identities used IP addresses in Connecticut, nowhere near my actual locations during the alleged crimes. The timeline of supposed offenses overlapped with dates I could prove I was elsewhere, working, attending conferences, documented by dozens of witnesses. Someone with access to my personal information had created a parallel criminal identity and planted it where the FBI would find it. The forensic IT specialist discovered something even more damning. The anonymous tips that had triggered the investigation all originated from the same source. They were routed through multiple VPNs to hide the trail, but the original IP traced back to Sterling Properties' corporate network. Not proof yet, but a thread to pull. "There is something else," the specialist said, frowning at her screen. "Whoever built this fake identity had access to documents from your childhood. Your original Social Security card application, your father's death certificate, your grandmother's estate records." She looked up at me. "This is not just someone who researched you. This is someone who had direct access to your family's private files for years, possibly decades." Victoria had been preparing to destroy me long before I ever walked out that door. I drove to the safe house to see Meredith for the first time since the rescue. She looked better than I expected, still processing trauma, still waking from nightmares. But there was a fierce determination in her eyes that reminded me of our grandmother. She had been organizing the evidence she brought from the mansion. 37 audio recordings of Victoria spanning months of secret surveillance, photographs of financial documents, emails between Victoria and her lawyers discussing how to neutralize the Elena problem. Records of payments to Dr. Gerald Hoffman, the physician who had signed the papers declaring our grandmother mentally incapacitated. Meredith played one of the recordings for me. Victoria's voice filled the room, cold and calculating. "If she ever comes back, I will have her committed, same as my mother. The doctor knows what to do." Hearing it was different from knowing it. My hands shook as I listened to my mother casually discuss destroying me. Meredith took my hand. "I know, I lived with that voice for 6 years after you left. Every day, pretending I did not hear, pretending I was loyal." Then she pulled out a small USB drive and held it like it might explode. "There is one more thing. I found this in Mom's personal safe. She does not know I have the combination." I watched her open it once and memorized the numbers. She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Elena, it is about Dad, our real dad. The police report from his car accident, and a second report, one that was never filed. The medical examiner's original findings before they were changed. My blood turned to ice. Changed how?" Meredith met my eyes. The original said his brakes were tampered with. The official report said driver error. I read the documents 3 times, tears streaming down my face. My father, David Sterling, had died when I was 5 years old. The official story was that he lost control on a rainy night and crashed into a ravine. Driver error, case closed. But the original medical examiner's report told a different story. The brake lines showed signs of deliberate cutting. The impact pattern was inconsistent with loss of control. The examiner had recommended a homicide investigation. 3 days later, a different examiner filed a revised report. Driver error, possible fatigue, no investigation needed. And there, in Meredith's evidence folder, was a record of a $75,000 payment from Victoria to the county examiner's office dated 1 week after my father's death. Victoria had not just manipulated her way into the family fortune, she had murdered my father to get it. David Sterling was Margaret's son, the rightful heir before Victoria married in. With him dead, she had clear access to Margaret and the company. She had orphaned me at 5 years old so she could take everything. And for 12 years afterward, I had lived under her roof, never knowing I was sleeping in the house of the woman who killed my dad. Something inside me shifted as I held that evidence. Not broke. I had been broken before. This was different. This was hardening, crystallizing. The rage that filled me was not hot. It was cold, Arctic, the kind that does not burn out. It freezes everything until you are ready to shatter it. 3 months into the investigation, Agent Webb called me back to the FBI field office. I expected more accusations, more questions, more suspicion. Instead, he greeted me almost respectfully. "Miss Sterling, I owe you an apology. We have completed our analysis of the evidence against you." The findings were conclusive. Every piece of evidence had been fabricated. The offshore accounts were created using stolen identity documents. IP forensics proved I could not have made the alleged transactions. The anonymous tips originated from Sterling Properties Network. The FBI was now investigating the source of the false reports. Victoria Sterling. I was formally cleared of all accusations. My accounts would be unfrozen within the week. Agent Webb leaned forward, speaking off the record. "We have seen this pattern before. Wealthy individuals using law enforcement as a weapon against enemies. It is illegal, and we take it seriously." "What happens to the person who filed the false reports?" I asked. Webb's expression hardened. "That is an ongoing investigation. But between us, she made a mistake. She left fingerprints everywhere because she was too arrogant to think anyone would check." As I stood to leave, he stopped me with one more piece of information. "During our investigation, we found some irregularities in Sterling Properties' financial records. Unrelated to your case, but significant. We have referred them to our Financial Crimes Division." He handed me his card. "If you happen to have any additional information about Victoria Sterling's business practices, we would be very interested to hear it." I took the card. "Agent Webb," I said, "you have no idea what I have." For the first time in months, I smiled. 6 months after the rescue, I was 24 years old and finally ready to fight back. Nathan and I had assembled a legal army, former federal prosecutors, forensic document experts, investigators who specialized in corporate fraud. We had Harold Whitman's original will with full chain of custody documentation, Meredith's recordings of Victoria's threats, evidence of the doctor's bribery, the suppressed medical examiner's report about my father, the FBI's referral about Sterling Properties' financial crimes, and now we had commissioned the country's leading forensic document examiner to analyze both versions of my grandmother's will. His name was Dr. Samuel Reeves, and he had spent 8 weeks studying every stroke of ink, every fiber of paper, every chemical marker that could reveal the truth. Today was the day of his final report. He sat at the conference table, sliding a 200-page analysis toward me. The original will is consistent with Margaret Sterling's known handwriting, pressure patterns normal, ink age verified to 6 years before her death. Victoria's version shows clear signs of forgery, pen pressure inconsistent, stroke patterns showing hesitation marks typical of someone copying rather than signing naturally. And most damning of all, the paper contains chemical markers that did not exist in commercial paper until 18 months after Margaret Sterling died. He removed his glasses and looked at me directly. "Miss Sterling, this is not just my opinion. This is scientific fact that will hold up in any court in the country. Your grandmother's will was forged, and I can prove it beyond any reasonable doubt." I held the report in my hands. 200 pages of scientific proof that Victoria had stolen my inheritance. Combined with everything else we had gathered, it was not just a lawsuit, it was an avalanche. Nathan sat beside me, reviewing the summary. So what now? I looked at the evidence spread across the table. 6 years of pain transformed into ammunition. Now we file, and then we take everything. 8 months after the FBI cleared my name, Phoenix Holdings had become something Victoria could no longer ignore. I was 24 now, approaching 25, and the company I had built from nothing was finally stepping out of the shadows. Our new headquarters occupied a renovated warehouse in downtown New Haven, 3 floors of open space filled with energy and ambition. 12 employees worked for me now, including 3 former Sterling Properties executives who had defected over the past year. Revenue was approaching $8 million annually. The name Phoenix had become known in Connecticut real estate circles, though the connection to Elena Sterling remained hidden. On paper, I was still just E. Whitman, a mysterious figure operating through an LLC. My mother had no idea that the competitor slowly eating into her market share was her own daughter. The irony was delicious. Victoria had kicked me out with nothing, expecting me to crawl back broken. Instead, I had built a company that was systematically targeting every deal she wanted. Every property I won was one she lost. Every client I attracted was a relationship she had neglected. Death by 1,000 cuts. She knew someone was hunting her. For the first time in her life, Victoria Sterling was the prey. She just did not know the predator shared her blood. The defectors from Sterling Properties had become my secret weapons. Marcus Chen had been Victoria's vice president of acquisitions until she publicly humiliated him at a board meeting for questioning one of her decisions. He brought connections and deal knowledge that would have taken me years to build. Sandra Wells had been Sterling's lead accountant until she discovered financial irregularities and was threatened into silence. She brought evidence and expertise. James Okonkwo had been a project manager who refused to bribe a zoning official and was fired for his integrity. He brought honor to a company that valued it. None of them knew who really owned Phoenix when they joined. They only knew it was not Sterling. When Marcus eventually discovered the truth, he laughed for 5 solid minutes. "Victoria's own daughter is the one taking her down," he said, wiping tears from his eyes. "This is better than I ever imagined." Their loyalty became personal after that, not just professional. They had all suffered under Victoria's cruelty. Now they had a chance to make it right. Sandra knocked on my office door one afternoon with a peculiar expression. "I have been cross-referencing Sterling's public filings with my records from when I worked there," she said. "Something does not add up. They are reporting revenue they could not possibly have. Either they have found a miracle cash source, or they are cooking the books to hide how badly they are bleeding." I leaned forward. How badly? Sandra placed a spreadsheet on my desk. The numbers were devastating. At this rate, Sterling Properties would be insolvent within 18 months. Victoria was running my grandmother's company into the ground. 3 weeks later, my phone buzzed with a text from an inside contact still working at Sterling. The message was brief, but explosive. "She knows. Board meeting today." Someone showed her the connection between Phoenix and your grandmother's lawyer. She went white, then red, then started screaming. Evacuated the floor, security escorting people out. It is chaos. I read the message 3 times, letting it sink in. Victoria had hired investigators to find out who was behind Phoenix Holdings. It had taken them months to connect E. Whitman to Harold Whitman to me. But now she understood. Now she knew that her forgotten daughter had been fighting her from the shadows for years. According to my contact, Victoria had thrown a chair through her office window when she realized the truth. She canceled all meetings for the rest of the week. Richard was seen leaving the building carrying boxes, possibly moving out for good. For 6 years I had been invisible, the troubled runaway, the embarrassment to forget. Now Victoria knew she had been fighting her own child. Her narrative was shattered, her certainty was broken, and her worst nightmare was just beginning. That night my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered anyway. Silence on the line for 10 seconds. Then Victoria's voice, barely controlled. You think you are clever, do you not? Building your little empire in secret. Turning my own employees against me, playing the victim while plotting my destruction. I said nothing, letting her rage fill the silence. You are nothing, she hissed. You were nothing when you left, and you are nothing now. I made you. I can unmake you. Finally I spoke. One sentence. No, Mother. You unmade yourself. I am just here to collect the pieces. I hung up before she could respond. I drove to Nathan's house that night, needing to process Victoria's call, the hatred in her voice, the threat beneath the words, the finality of what was coming. Nathan opened the door, saw my face, and did not ask questions. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey and sat beside me on the couch. We had been dancing around our feelings for over a year. The war against Victoria had consumed everything, leaving no room for anything personal. But tonight felt different. Tonight the walls I had built around myself felt too heavy to maintain. She finally knows, Nathan said quietly. She knows, I replied, and now she is going to come at us with everything she has. Good. I am tired of waiting. Silence stretched between us. Then I asked the question I had been avoiding for months. Nathan, when this is over, if we win, what happens to us? He set down his glass and turned to face me fully. His eyes were intense, searching. What happens is, I stop pretending I am only in this for revenge. What happens is, I tell you that somewhere along the way, destroying Victoria became less important than building something with you. My heart pounded. I had kept everyone at distance for 7 years. Trust felt impossible after what Victoria had done. But Nathan had proven himself 100 times over. He had seen me at my worst, my most vulnerable, my most vicious. And he had stayed. I do not know how to do this, I admitted. I do not know how to let someone in without waiting for them to betray me. Nathan reached over and took my hand. Then do not let me in, let me stand beside you. We will figure out the rest when we are not at war. He pulled me closer, and for the first time in 7 years, I stopped fighting. The kiss that followed was not gentle, it was fierce, desperate, the release of everything we had been holding back. When we finally pulled apart, I realized something had shifted. I did not just want to destroy Victoria anymore. I wanted to survive her. I wanted a life on the other side of this. And I wanted Nathan in it. 1 month later, we gathered in the law offices of Harrison and Webb to coordinate the final assault. Elena, Nathan, Meredith, and our legal team filled the conference room. The civil lawsuit contesting the forged will was ready to file. The criminal referral for fraud and forgery was prepared for the prosecutor. The evidence about my father's death had been handed to the cold case unit. Meredith's recordings had been authenticated and certified admissible. And the FBI financial crimes investigation was building momentum every day. My 25th birthday was 3 months away. The day I could legally claim my inheritance under the original will. But we were not waiting for the birthday. We would file suit next week and force Victoria to fight on multiple fronts simultaneously. Nathan announced that Coal Development would publicly propose a merger negotiation with Phoenix Holdings. Combined, we would be larger than Sterling Properties. The board would panic. Sterling stock was already dropping. Victoria's control depended on the illusion of stability. Shatter that illusion, and the board might turn on her. Then Meredith spoke up. There is one more thing. I was waiting until we were all together. She slid a document across the table. A letter, handwritten, addressed to the Sterling Properties Board of Directors, signed by Richard. He sent this to me last week, Meredith said. He wants to testify against Victoria in exchange for immunity. I stared at the letter. Richard, the spineless stepfather who had helped Victoria destroy countless lives, was offering to flip. Can we trust him? Nathan asked. Meredith smiled coldly. We do not have to trust him. We just have to use him. He knows where the bodies are buried. Some of them literally. 2 weeks later, I attended the Connecticut Commercial Real Estate Conference as the public owner of Phoenix Holdings for the first time. My identity was about to become very public. Nathan stood beside me in the crowded ballroom. Meredith watched via live stream from the safe house. A major announcement was expected. The $200 million waterfront redevelopment project in Bridgeport was going to bid. The largest single development in Connecticut in a decade. City officials took the stage and announced the two finalists, Sterling Properties and Phoenix Holdings. The room buzzed with confusion. Phoenix? Who ran Phoenix? I stepped forward to accept the finalist certificate. The MC read my full name into the microphone. Elena Margaret Sterling, CEO of Phoenix Holdings. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed. Whispers erupted everywhere. And across the room, Victoria Sterling stood frozen, her face white with shock and fury. Our eyes met across the ballroom. For one delicious moment, we stared at each other. Then I smiled politely, accepted the certificate, and returned to my seat. After the ceremony, Victoria cornered me in the hallway. Security guards flanked us both, but neither moved to intervene. She was shaking with rage. "You think this is victory?" she hissed. "This is a circus, a spectacle. When the bidding starts, I will crush your little company. I will outspend you, outmaneuver you, destroy every relationship you have built." I tilted my head, studying the woman who had haunted my nightmares for 7 years. She looked older than I remembered, smaller somehow. The mask of perfection was cracking. "You can try," I said calmly. "But here is the thing, Mother." I leaned in close, whispering so only she could hear. "I have the original will. I have recordings of your threats. I have proof you forged Grandma's signature. I have evidence you murdered my father. And I have Richard, ready to testify to all of it." I pulled back, watching the color drain from her face. "This bid is not about the project. It is about watching you lose everything in front of everyone who ever feared you. And Mother, you are going to lose." Victoria stood frozen in that hallway, her mask finally cracking completely. For one moment I saw something beneath the calculation and cruelty, pure animal terror. She knew. She finally understood that this was not a business competition. This was an execution. And she was already strapped to the chair. I walked away without looking back. My phone buzzed. "Nathan, board meeting scheduled for next week. 3 directors want to discuss leadership concerns. It is starting." I smiled, sliding the phone into my pocket. The bidding war was just the public show. Behind the scenes, Victoria's empire was already crumbling, the board was turning. Richard was flipping, the FBI was circling, and in 3 months I would turn 25, old enough to claim what was always mine. The only question left was whether Victoria would still be free when that day came, or whether she would be watching from a prison cell. I woke at 5 in the morning on my 25th birthday, too anxious to sleep. Today was 2 milestones in one. The day I could legally claim my inheritance under my grandmother's original will. And the day of the final bid presentation for the $200 million Bridgeport waterfront project. 8 years of building had led to this moment. 8 years of survival, of patience, of watching my mother destroy herself while I grew stronger in the shadows. Nathan brought me coffee and kissed my forehead. "Happy birthday. Ready to destroy your mother?" I smiled grimly. "I have been ready for 8 years." Our final review of the Phoenix bid package confirmed what I already knew. It was comprehensive, innovative, community-focused, everything Victoria's presentation would lack. But rumors had been swirling all week. Victoria was desperate, making calls to everyone who owed her favors, bribes to city council members, threats to subcontractors, rumors planted about Phoenix's inexperience and my supposed mental instability. She was throwing everything she had at this final battle. At 7 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, a photograph. Victoria entering City Hall through a back entrance at 6 in the morning. The caption read, "She has been in Councilman Porter's office for 45 minutes. Whatever she is offering, it is big. I forwarded the image to our legal team. If Victoria was bribing officials, we would have evidence. If she was just desperate, she would make mistakes. Either way, I was ready. The media gathered outside City Hall like vultures sensing blood. The Bridgeport waterfront bid had become statewide news, not just because of the money, but because of the family drama. Headlines had been running for weeks. Sterling versus Sterling. Mother-daughter real estate war. Victoria had used every interview to paint me as a bitter, troubled child seeking revenge against the mother who had tried to help her. I refused to engage, letting my work speak for itself. As I climbed the steps, a reporter shoved a microphone in my face. "Elena, your mother claims you are mentally unstable and this bid is just a personal vendetta. How do you respond?" I stopped and turned to face the camera. My response is in the bid documents. 200 pages of plans, financials, and community partnerships. If that is a vendetta, I would love to see what she calls professionalism. I walked inside without waiting for follow-up questions. Behind me, I heard another journalist mutter, "God, she is good." I allowed myself one small moment of satisfaction. Then it was time to fight. The sabotage attempts had started before I even reached the building. My lead contractor called in a panic. Someone had been calling our suppliers, telling them Phoenix was going bankrupt and would not pay. 3 of them were threatening to pull out. My PR person reported anonymous tips sent to every news outlet claiming Phoenix Holdings had ties to organized crime. Nathan's office called with news that someone had tried to access our sealed bid documents through a hacked city employee login. I stayed calm. I documented everything. I called suppliers personally and reassured them with bank statements proving our solvency. Legal sent cease and desist letters to media outlets publishing unverified claims. We reported the hacking attempt to Agent Webb, adding another item to Victoria's growing file. She was fighting dirty. But dirty fighting leaves fingerprints. The city council chambers were packed. Media, investors, community members, industry professionals. Victoria sat on one side of the room. I sat on the other. The first time we had been in the same space since I confronted her in that conference hallway. Sterling Properties presented first. Victoria took the podium with decades of experience radiating from every gesture. Polished, confident. Her presentation was slick. Glossy renderings, a celebrity architect, promises of jobs and tax revenue that sounded impressive until you looked closely. I noticed what the council might miss. The financials were vague, the timelines were unrealistic, the community benefits were promises without specifics. A council member asked about Sterling's debt-to-equity ratio. Victoria deflected smoothly. "Our financials are solid." Next question. Another asked about the FBI investigation into Sterling's accounting practices. Victoria's face tightened almost imperceptibly. Unfounded allegations from disgruntled former employees. The room shifted uncomfortably. Everyone had read the news. My turn came, and I approached the podium with my heart pounding but my voice steady. My presentation was everything hers was not. Detailed, transparent, community-centered. I showed actual letters of support from local businesses. Guaranteed local hiring commitments with penalties if we failed to meet them. Partnership with the community college for job training programs. Full financial transparency with every number available for review. Halfway through my presentation, I noticed Victoria whispering urgently to her lawyer. Something was wrong. I kept presenting but watched from the corner of my eye. Then Victoria stood abruptly and walked out of the chambers. Her lawyer followed, phone pressed to his ear. Something had happened. Something that could not wait. I finished my presentation, answered the council's questions thoroughly, and stepped down from the podium. Whatever had rattled Victoria, I would find out soon enough. And I had a feeling it was very bad news for her. 2 hours later, both teams waited in the hallway outside the chambers. The doors were closed for deliberation. The tension was suffocating. I stood with Nathan, Meredith, and our team. Victoria stood alone. Richard was nowhere to be seen. Her lawyer was still on the phone, pacing near the windows. Victoria's composure had shattered. Her makeup was smudged. Her hands trembled visibly. Whatever news she had received during my presentation had broken something in her. The doors finally opened. The council president approached the podium. After careful deliberation, the Bridgeport City Council has selected the proposal that best serves our community's interests. She paused. The room held its breath. The $200 million waterfront redevelopment contract is awarded to Phoenix Holdings. My team erupted in cheers. Nathan grabbed my hand and squeezed tight. Meredith was crying, happy tears for the first time in years. I looked across the room at Victoria. She did not react to the announcement. She just stood there, frozen, staring at me with an expression I had never seen before. Not anger, not hatred, fear, pure, undiluted terror. Her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, and what little color remained in her face drained completely. Her hands shook so badly she dropped the phone. It clattered on the marble floor, screen facing up. I was close enough to read the notification. FBI, warrant issued. Call immediately. The walls were closing in on Victoria Sterling, and she finally knew there was no way out. 1 hour after the vote, I stepped out of our victory celebration to take a call. Unknown number. Richard's voice on the other end, broken and desperate. Elena, do not hang up, please. I need to talk to you. I almost ended the call immediately, but something in his voice stopped me. He sounded terrified in a way I had never heard before. The FBI raided our home this morning, he said. While Victoria was at City Hall, they took everything. Computers, files, safe contents? Good, I replied coldly. You both deserve it. You do not understand. It is worse than you know. Victoria did not just forge the will. She has been embezzling from Sterling Properties for years, tens of millions. The company is hollow, debt hidden through fake subsidiaries. My blood ran cold. How hollow? Richard's explanation was devastating. Victoria had taken out massive loans using Sterling shares as collateral. The Bridgeport bid was her last chance to generate cash flow to cover the gaps. Without it, Sterling Properties would collapse within months. And there was more. She has been paying the Harrisons with company money to keep them quiet about something, he said. The Harrisons! The family Victoria had tried to sell me to. Something else? I demanded. What something else? Richard's voice cracked. Your father. The Harrisons helped cover it up. Their son, the one Victoria tried to force you to marry, he was the one who cut the brake lines. Victoria paid them to make it look like an accident. I stood in that hallway, phone pressed to my ear, and felt my entire understanding of my life rearrange itself. Harrison Jr., the violent man I had refused to marry at 17, had murdered my father when I was 5 years old. Victoria had paid his family to do it, then tried to sell me to them as a bride to keep the secret buried forever. It was not just business. It was not just greed. It was monstrous beyond anything I had imagined. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, my voice cold as steel. Because Victoria is going to prison, Richard replied, and I am trying to stay out. I will testify to everything. But I need your help. I need immunity. I processed Richard's revelations in the silence of the empty hallway. Nathan appeared in the doorway, sensing something was wrong. What about the Harrison family? I asked Richard. Are they still a threat? They are already negotiating with the FBI, he said. Everyone is trying to make deals. It is every man for himself now, and the evidence? The proof of what they did to my father? Harrison Sr. kept records. Insurance, he called it. The FBI has it now. It is over, Elena. All of it. Victoria's entire house of cards is collapsing. I told Richard I would have my lawyers consider immunity, but made no promises. If he was lying, if this was a trap, I would personally ensure he spent the rest of his life in prison next to Victoria. He said he understood. I hung up and told Nathan everything. The Harrison involvement, the embezzlement, the imminent collapse. His face went from shock to grim satisfaction. So we did not just win the bid, he said. We won everything. I shook my head. Not yet. Victoria is still free. The board has not removed her. And I still do not have my inheritance. My phone buzzed. A text from Agent Webb. Ms. Sterling. Arrest warrant issued for Victoria Sterling. Charges include fraud, forgery, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit murder. She has 24 hours to surrender. Thought you should know before it hits the news. Conspiracy to commit murder. They believed us. They had enough evidence. My mother was about to be arrested for killing my father. I waited for satisfaction, triumph, closure. But all I felt was empty. And then, slowly, relief. The weight I had carried for 8 years was finally about to lift. Nathan drove me home that night as news vans gathered outside Sterling Properties headquarters. The story was breaking everywhere. By morning it would be on every channel in the country. But Victoria was not answering her phone. Her lawyer claimed not to know her location. The FBI was searching, but she had not been seen since leaving City Hall. As we pulled into Nathan's driveway, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Victoria's voice, eerily calm, almost peaceful. Hello, sweetheart. I suppose you think you have won. My heart stopped. Where are you? Does it matter? I just wanted you to know. This is not over. It will never be over. You took everything from me. And before they put me in handcuffs, I am going to make sure you understand what it feels like to lose everything too. The line went dead. I looked at Nathan, ice in my veins. She is planning something bad. We had 24 hours before Victoria had to surrender, and in that time, a desperate woman with nothing left to lose could do a lot of damage. Midnight came and went without word from Victoria. I paced Nathan's living room, checking my phone every few minutes, unable to sleep. Security was posted outside. Meredith had been moved to a different safe house as a precaution. The FBI was searching, but Victoria had vanished completely after her threatening call. 12 hours since she promised to make me understand what it felt like to lose everything. Nathan tried to get me to rest, but I refused. Victoria had resources, connections, desperation. She could be anywhere. Fleeing the country, hiding locally, planning something terrible. I kept replaying her words. This is not over. It will never be over. What did Victoria have left to take? Meredith was safe. Nathan was here. The company was won. The inheritance was secured. Unless she was planning something I could not predict. Something beyond business or money. Something personal and permanent. At 2 a.m, my phone rang. Agent Webb, we found her, he said. Where? My heart pounded so hard I could barely hear his response. The cemetery. She has been there for hours, apparently, sitting by your grandmother's grave. Something twisted in my chest. Not sympathy, but a strange, hollow recognition. Of course that was where she went, the woman she had destroyed to build her empire. The grave she had never once visited in the 8 years since the funeral. Is she surrendering? I asked. She is not responding to our officers. She asked to speak to you, only you. I looked at Nathan, who was already grabbing his keys. Tell her I am on my way. The Greenwich Cemetery was the oldest in the county, filled with generations of wealthy families who had built their legacies on this land. FBI vehicles waited at the entrance, lights off. Agent Webb escorted me through the dark paths, past marble monuments and weathered headstones, toward the section where my grandmother was buried. And there, sitting on the frozen ground before Margaret Sterling's grave, was Victoria. She looked smaller somehow, older, the designer clothes wrinkled, makeup gone, a bottle of wine beside her half empty. She did not turn when I approached. Did you know your grandmother hated me? She said to the headstone. From the very first day I married her son. She was a good judge of character, I replied. Victoria laughed bitterly. She was the only one who ever saw through me. Everyone else, your father, the board, society, they all believed the performance. But not Margaret. Never Margaret. She finally turned to face me. That is why I had to destroy her, before she destroyed me. Her eyes were red, swollen. I had never seen Victoria cry before. Not once in my entire life. I did not plan to kill him, she whispered, looking back at the grave. Your father. It was supposed to be a scare, make him compliant. But Harrison's son went too far. And once it was done, what was I supposed to do? Confess? Go to prison? I had a future to build. I had you and Meredith to raise. You did not raise us, I said, my voice shaking with rage. You used us. You were going to sell me to a murderer to cover your crimes. Victoria tilted her head, studying me with something almost like curiosity. And look what it made you. Strong, fierce, a survivor. Would you be who you are today without me? I refused to play her game, to let her take credit for my survival when she had been the thing I was surviving. I am who I am despite you, I said. Not because of you. Every good thing in me came from Dad and Grandma. Every scar came from you. Something in Victoria's face cracked. Not rage this time. Exhaustion. Defeat. Something almost like grief for a life she had chosen to destroy. What if I told you where the rest of the money is, she said. The offshore accounts. There is still 40 million. We could split it. You could take everything and just let me go. I almost laughed. You think this was ever about money? Then what? Revenge? You have had it. I am ruined. My reputation, my company, my freedom, all gone. What more do you want? I stepped closer, my voice dropping low. I want you to understand what you took. Not the money or the company. You took my father. You took my childhood. You took my ability to trust anyone. You took 20 years I should have had with Grandma before you isolated her and broke her down. I knelt in front of my mother, forcing her to meet my eyes. I do not want you to go to prison because I hate you. I want you to go to prison because you are a murderer. Because you forged documents and stole from your own company and tried to have your daughter committed to cover your crimes. Because justice matters. Because my father deserves it. Because Grandma deserves it. I stood up, brushing the frozen grass from my knees. And because every day you spend in a cell, you will know that the daughter you threw away is the one who put you there. Victoria stared at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. You really are Margaret's granddaughter. She held out her wrists to the waiting agents. I am ready. 3 days later, I walked into the Sterling Properties boardroom for an emergency shareholders meeting. Victoria's arrest had made national news. The stock had plummeted 40% in 72 hours. Board members were panicking, investors fleeing, employees wondering if they would still have jobs next month. I arrived with my legal team and Harold Whitman, the 90-year-old attorney who had kept my grandmother's secret for a decade. The room went silent when I entered. My lawyer presented the court-certified original will. The forensic expert's testimony was projected on screen for everyone to see. Clear, undeniable proof that Margaret Sterling had intended her granddaughter to inherit 51% of the company. The forged will was legally void. I was the rightful majority shareholder. Some board members resisted. Victoria's oldest allies, hoping to maintain their power. Others immediately recognized the new reality. The company's lead counsel confirmed that the documentation was irrefutable. A motion was called. Vote to recognize Elena Sterling as majority shareholder and install her as CEO. The vote was not even close. 9-2. The two dissenters were Victoria's oldest allies, men who had helped her cover up financial irregularities for years. They were removed from the board that same afternoon, facing their own investigations. As the room absorbed what had happened, Harold Whitman stood slowly from his chair. He walked to the front of the room with the careful steps of a man who had waited a very long time for this moment. Margaret Sterling was my client and my friend, he said, his voice quavering but clear. She built this company from nothing. She loved her granddaughter more than anything in this world, and she made me promise that one day Elena would take her rightful place. He turned to me, eyes shining with tears. Ms. Sterling, welcome home. I addressed the shareholders and remaining board members from the head of the conference table. My table now. I told them I was not here to tear the company apart. My grandmother had built sterling properties with integrity and vision. My mother had nearly destroyed it with greed and lies. I intended to rebuild it the way it should have been run all along. I announced immediate changes. A full forensic audit of all accounts, complete cooperation with the FBI investigation, severance and support for employees affected by the transition, integration with Phoenix Holdings to stabilize the finances and restore investor confidence. Nathan stepped forward as strategic partner. Meredith was offered a position as Director of Community Relations. After the meeting, as the room emptied, I stood at the window looking out at the city my grandmother had helped build. Meredith came to stand beside me. "How does it feel," she asked, "to finally have everything you fought for?" I thought about the question. 8 years of struggle, sleeping in motel rooms, working 3 jobs, building a company from nothing, watching our mother arrested at our grandmother's grave. "Honestly," I said, "it feels like the end of something, not a beginning." Meredith squeezed my hand. "Maybe that is okay. Maybe some things need to end before better things can start." We stood there together, 2 sisters who had survived the same monster, finally free. 4 months later, I sat in the gallery of a federal courthouse and watched Victoria Sterling receive her sentence. The charges were read aloud: fraud, forgery, embezzlement, obstruction of justice, conspiracy to commit murder, the Harrison family had testified. Their son had confessed to cutting my father's brake lines in exchange for a reduced sentence. Richard had testified as well, immunity granted, relocated somewhere far away. Victoria offered no defense. She pled guilty to avoid a trial that would have exposed even more of her crimes. The judge pronounced the verdict: 25 years for conspiracy to commit murder, 15 years for fraud and forgery to be served concurrently, full restitution ordered, no possibility of parole for 12 years. Victoria stood motionless, absorbing the words. She did not look at me. Not once throughout the entire proceeding. I felt no celebration, no tears, just quiet. 25 years. My mother would be nearly 80 when she became eligible for parole. It was not death, but it was the end of everything she had built and stolen and schemed for. Justice. Finally, after 20 years, 2 years passed. Sterling Properties merged with Phoenix Holdings to become Sterling Phoenix Development, honoring both legacies. I stabilized the company, restored its reputation, rebuilt relationships Victoria had destroyed. Nathan and I were engaged. Meredith was thriving, finally free from our mother's shadow. I started a foundation in my father's name, supporting children from abusive homes. Life was quiet, peaceful, the kind of peace I had never imagined possible. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday, my phone screen lit up with a notification that stopped my heart. Missed calls, 102, all from the same number, a number I recognized but had not seen in 2 years. The prison's visitor contact line, Victoria, calling 102 times. I stared at the screen, that old, familiar knot forming in my stomach. What could she possibly want now? What more was there to say? Nathan saw my face and came closer. "What is wrong?" I showed him the screen. He went very still. "You do not have to answer." "I know," I said. But we both knew that was not true. Whatever Victoria wanted, ignoring it would not make it go away. It never had. I put the phone down on the kitchen counter and watched it light up with call 103, then 104. The rhythm was almost hypnotic. Ring, ring, silence, ring again. Obsessive, desperate, like Victoria herself. 2 years of silence, 2 years of peace. And now this. What had changed? What could she possibly need badly enough to call over 100 times? Part of me wanted to block the number, throw the phone in a drawer, pretend I had never seen it. I had built a life. I had found love. I had reclaimed my inheritance and my name. I did not owe Victoria Sterling anything. But another part of me, the part that still remembered being a little girl who just wanted her mother to love her, that part whispered, "What if she is dying? What if it is about Dad? What if there is still one more secret?" I picked up the phone. My finger hovered over the answer button. Nathan watched me, saying nothing, letting me choose. 105 missed calls. One decision that could reopen every wound I had spent 8 years trying to heal. I pressed answer. Silence crackled on the line for several seconds. I pressed the phone to my ear, heart pounding, waiting. Then Victoria's voice came through, older, smaller, stripped of all the power that had once made grown men tremble. "Elena, you answered. I did not think you would." "I almost did not," I replied. "What do you want, Victoria?" The use of her first name instead of mother was deliberate, a reminder that she had forfeited that title years ago. I heard her take a shaky breath before speaking. "I am sick, Elena. Cancer. The doctors say I have maybe a year, probably less." I waited for the gut punch, the devastation, but it felt more like a door closing on a room I had already left. "I am sorry to hear that," I said, and surprisingly I meant it, not forgiveness, just basic human acknowledgement of suffering. "I am not calling to ask for forgiveness," Victoria said, her voice catching slightly. "I know I do not deserve it. I know what I did to you, to your father, to Margaret. I have had 2 years of nothing but time to understand exactly what I am." She paused. "I am calling because there is one more thing you need to know. One more secret I kept, and I do not want to die with it still buried." I moved to the living room and sat down. Nathan followed, sitting beside me. I put the phone on speaker. No more secrets between us. Victoria explained slowly, her voice weakening with each sentence. "There was a safety deposit box I had never heard of. Not the one in Vermont from my grandmother, a different one. Victoria's own box, hidden for decades. Your father left something for you," she said, "before he died. He knew something was wrong, he sensed it. He wrote you a letter and gave it to me to hold until you were old enough." My heart stopped. What? David Sterling, in the weeks before his death, had grown suspicious of Victoria. He wrote a letter to his baby daughter just in case something happened to him. He trusted his wife to give it to me on my 18th birthday. Victoria never did. She kept it hidden for 22 years. Another theft. "It is in box 447 at First Greenwich Bank," Victoria said. "The key is taped inside my jewelry box at the mansion. Richard never found it." "Why?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Why tell me now? You could have died with this secret like all the others." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "Because I have had 2 years to think about the night your father died." The look in his eyes when the car started sliding. "I see it every night when I close my eyes." Her voice cracked. "He knew, Elena. In that last second, he knew it was me. And the last thing he thought about was you, his baby girl." The letter was his way of making sure part of him would survive, would reach you, no matter what happened. Tears streamed down my face. "He loved you more than anything in this world," Victoria whispered, "and I stole that from both of you. I cannot give it back, but I can give you his words." 2 days later, I stood in a private viewing room at First Greenwich Bank. The key had been exactly where Victoria said, taped inside her jewelry box in the mansion that had long since been sold to cover debts. Box 447 was small, dusty, untouched for over 2 decades. Inside was a single envelope, yellowed with age. My father's handwriting on the front. "For my Elena, when you are ready." My hands trembled as I opened it. The letter was 3 pages long, written in handwriting that slanted slightly to the right, pressed hard into the paper like he was trying to make his words permanent. He wrote about the day I was born, the happiest day of his life, how I had grabbed his finger and would not let go, how he knew in that moment he would do anything to protect me. He wrote about his hopes for my future, college, a career I loved, someone who would cherish me the way I deserved, a family of my own someday. He wrote about his fears. "Your mother is not who I thought she was," he admitted. "I have seen things that trouble me. If something happens to me, I want you to know it was not an accident." And he wrote about his love, Unconditional, overwhelming, forever. The final paragraph broke me completely. Be brave, my little one. Be kind, and never let anyone make you feel small. Your daddy loves you more than all the stars in the sky, and wherever I am, I will always be watching over you. I sat in that cold bank vault for over an hour, reading the letter again and again until I had memorized every word. Then I pressed it to my chest and whispered into the empty room. I found it, Daddy. I am brave. I am kind. And I never let them make me feel small. 1 week later, I signed in as a visitor at the Women's Federal Correctional Facility. Nathan had supported whatever choice I made. Meredith had refused to come, not ready, maybe never would be. I needed to close this chapter myself. Victoria shuffled into the visitation room wearing a prison uniform. No makeup, thinner than before. We sat across from each other with glass between us. Silence stretched for a long moment. "You came," she said. "I did not expect you to." "I read the letter," I replied. Victoria's eyes closed briefly. "And he loved me. He knew what you were. And he tried to leave a piece of himself for me just in case." Victoria nodded slowly. "He was always better than me. I think that is why I hated him in the end." I leaned forward, meeting my mother's eyes through the scratched plexiglass. "I want you to know something," I said. "I do not forgive you. I probably never will. What you did to Dad, to Grandma, to me and Meredith, forgiveness would dishonor their memory." Victoria flinched but nodded. "I understand, but I am not going to carry hatred for you anymore either. It is too heavy, and you are not worth the weight." I saw something shift in her eyes. Not hope, not relief, just acknowledgement. "I am letting you go, Victoria, not for your sake, for mine, so I can finally be free of you completely." 6 months later, the Sterling Phoenix Development Annual Gala filled a grand ballroom with laughter and light. It was also my engagement party. Nathan stood beside me, ring on my finger, future in our eyes. Meredith was there, laughing with colleagues, finally comfortable in her own skin. Diane Chen attended, the woman who had given me my first real chance when I had nothing. Harold Whitman's daughter came in his place. He had passed away peacefully 3 months ago, his promise to my grandmother finally fulfilled. I took the podium to address the room. 10 years ago, I told them, I was 17 years old, standing on a cold sidewalk with nothing but a suitcase and $800. Tonight I stand here with a company, a family, a future, and something far more valuable than any of that. I have the truth. I have people who love me, and I have myself, whole, healed, free. I raised my glass. To everyone who believed in me when I could not believe in myself. To my grandmother Margaret, who loved me enough to fight for me even from the grave. To my father David, whose words finally reached me after 22 years. And to every person who has ever been told they are not enough. You are. You always were. The room erupted in applause. Nathan took my hand and pulled me close. "Your grandmother would be proud," he whispered. "She is," I said, "and so is my dad. I can feel them here tonight. Then let us give them something to celebrate." He nodded toward the dance floor where the band was starting our song. I laughed, a real laugh, light and free. "Lead the way, Mr. Cole. Always, Mrs. Sterling." We danced, and for the first time in 10 years, I did not think about Victoria at all. Later that night, I stood alone on the balcony, city lights spread below, stars scattered above. My father's letter rested in my pocket. I carried it everywhere now. I thought about the journey from that cold November night to this warm spring evening. 10 years ago, my mother slammed a door in my face and told me I would come back begging in a month. I did not beg. I did not crawl. I walked away with my dignity, built an empire from nothing, and watched her lose everything she stole. But here is what I learned. Revenge is not the same as healing. Taking back what is yours is not the same as being whole. Victoria is dying in a prison cell. The Harrisons are behind bars. Richard is living in hiding somewhere, forgotten by everyone. And me? I am standing on a balcony with a ring on my finger, a company with my name on it, and a family that I chose. The people who hurt you want you to stay broken. They want you to define yourself by the wounds they left. The greatest revenge is not destroying them. It is building a life so beautiful that their cruelty becomes a footnote, not a headline. Nathan appeared in the doorway, silhouetted by the warm light from inside. "You okay out here?" I turned, slipping my father's letter back into my pocket. "Better than okay. I think I am finally finished." Finished? With the old story. The one where I am the victim, the outcast, the daughter who was thrown away. I walked toward him, taking his outstretched hand. I am ready to write a new one. One where I am just Elena. Not Victoria's daughter, not the girl who was kicked out. Just me. Nathan smiled, pulling me inside toward the light and music and laughter. I cannot wait to read it. And for the first time in 10 years, neither could I. So now I will ask you the question that started this whole story. The one that has been living in my heart since that cold November night when I was 17. If the people who threw you out, who told you that you were nothing, who watched you break and called it discipline, if they showed up years later with empty hands and desperate eyes, would you open the door? Would you let them back into your life? Would you forgive what they did? Or would you let them stand outside in the cold, feeling exactly what they once put you through? I answered that call. I read my father's letter. I visited Victoria one last time. But I did not open the door. Not all the way. Some doors are meant to stay closed. Some people do not deserve a second chance. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is walk away. Not with hatred, but with freedom. My name is Elena Sterling. I was kicked out at 17 with nothing. And 10 years later, I have everything that matters. Not because I got revenge, but because I refused to let my mother's cruelty define my life. If you are going through something like this, if someone is trying to break you, control you, throw you away, I want you to know this. You can survive. You can rise. And you do not have to become as cruel as they are to win. You just have to outlast them. Outgrow them, outshine them, and one day they will be the ones making 102 calls that you do not have to answer. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment and tell me what you would have done. Would you have answered the call or let it ring? Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to this channel for more stories of survival, justice, and the beautiful revenge of living well. Remember, the best revenge is not destruction. It is becoming someone they can never touch again. Until next time, stay brave, stay kind, and never let anyone make you feel small.